Good morning. Back in the 1990s, I was a minister at Parramatta Mission, a church in Parramatta with a medium-sized social welfare ministry across Western Sydney, dealing with predominantly people who were struggling, who were marginalised and pushed to the edges of life, homeless and other people. It was an amazing kind of experience. And one of the amazing experiences was when a local businessman, Bernie, came, encouraged by a mate of his, John, who supported the Exodus Foundation at Ashfield with Bill Cruz, wanted to set up a soup kitchen in Parramatta. Really wanted to support the setup of one, but wanted us to run it. And so together we found a place, a disused church building around the corner. He helped fit it out, and he paid for a coordinator, cook person, Heather. Now, Heather was a miracle worker, as was Bernie in getting things going. But not only that, she worked the miracles of love with people, listening and caring, and her and her team created a space where people felt welcomed and came. People who were homeless and struggling with life, people who were impoverished and couldn't make ends meet, and often skimped on food, and so could get a healthy, decent meal at least once a day. People who were suffering in the economic crises of the 80s and 90s and who couldn't make ends meet, even though they worked. Sometimes local workers, business people and so on would come, they'd left wallets and money at home, or they're at the end of the week and they just didn't have money. Could they have something to eat? Inevitably they'd come back with a donation and gratitude. But it was a place of welcome where people could come and not just eat food, but gather in a community that would listen. And the staff of the mission and the team that Heather had around her were caring and loving and gracious and gave a lot of themselves to the people, but they received a lot back from the people. And a community formed, and there was a lot of support and help. I remember one of the staff people talking about a conversation she had with one of the women, a woman who'd been there for maybe a couple of months. She sat down and said, how are things going? How are you? And she said, I just realised that I've been coming here for a couple of months and I feel much better than I have for a long, long time. I don't know whether it's because I'm getting a good, nutritious meal every day in my belly, or whether it's because I've got people to talk to, people around me, and I'm not alone and lonely anymore. I think it was a bit of all of that. Heather and her team created these miracles of love and grace, of welcoming people into this place of community and love. Heather's long since retired, and there's been lots of changes in what we called the kitchen back then. It's now called Meals Plus, and it's out of the church hall in Parramatta. And Paul runs it. And Paul continues to provide the same kinds of miracles, and sometimes more than even Heather did. Food just seems to come and flow. He was talking to me recently and he said he was expecting 100 for breakfast and 200 for lunch, 300 each day. It was this year, this financial year, he served somewhere around 85 to 90,000 meals. A group of us have played music for his Christmas lunches, and 700 or 800 people come through in the day. Just come and flow. And he's got a team of volunteers, 100, maybe 50, 100 people volunteering. But the food, I don't know where it comes from. There's ham and chicken and salads and prawns, and then desserts and tea and coffee and cool drinks. And it just keeps coming. It doesn't matter how many people turn up, the food's there and it's there and it's there. It just keeps flowing. But it's not just that, it's the welcome and the love and the care that he provides, not only at the Christmas lunch, but every day. People come with all sorts of pain and problems and grief and conflicts and hurts. And Paul's there and his team to minister, to care. And a community forms of welcome and grace and love. And he incarnates this gracious love of Jesus. And this week in Mark's story of Jesus, we get a number of different vignettes, different stories. First of all, the disciples return from the mission trip, having gone out to offer what they can into the world and receiving the hospitality of people. and seeing the miracles of love expand and multiply in the communities in which they're part. Seeing God at work in real ways, changing lives and transforming people and situations and bringing people together in new ways. And they come to share this excitement, but the crowds gather round, and so Jesus and the disciples seek a quieter space where they can debrief these wonderful experiences. But the crowds see where they're going. They go by ship, by boat, and the crowds get there first. And Jesus looks out at this crowd of people and feels compassion and offers them words of hope and encouragement and love, words of grace, sharing with them God's love for them, reaffirming that they are loved by God. Despite what the world around them says, religious leaders or the empire or the harshness of their lives. And then as the day goes on, it's not just the hunger in their being, in their spirit that Jesus feels, but he recognises the hunger in their bellies. And he takes what food he has, like Heather and Paul, and breaks it, and after blessing it, breaks it, and gives it to the people. And there's enough for this crowd to eat. It's a story in stark contrast to the one just before it, where King Herod provides an exclusive feast that's an orgy of the finest foods and wines, but becomes an orgy of eroticism and murder, death. It's an exclusive meal that's violent and abusive. Over and against that is this open meal where anyone's welcomed and included. Everyone has enough to eat and they share the same simple food that fills the body, but also the food of life that fills the spirit. And then at the end of the day, the people disperse and Jesus sends the disciples away in their boats across the lake a bit. And as they journey, the waves and the wind blow up, and he comes to them in that crisis, in that struggle, and brings peace to them and the world around them. And when they land on the other side the next day, they're walking around in the villages and towns, and people recognise them, and they flood Jesus looking for hope, looking for healing and life and peace and hope. And he ministers to them in their needs. These are stories of life and hope and peace. Stories that transform the world in which people live. A world that is often violent and powerful and abusive. A world of scarcity where people don't have enough. And Jesus brings what he has and shares it generously so that everyone has enough but no one has too much. And this is the vision of God's reign in the world. What God is doing amongst us. What we see in Meals Plus. Or in the story I saw recently of Susan, who is a Palestinian whose family were refugees and have come out some years ago, and who looks at the pain of her countrymen and women and sees the violence and the abuse and the horror that they experience. And those who have been able to brought in as refugees from that crisis in Palestine. She gathers those families, and her and a little ministry, her little charity that she's set up along with other charities that work together, try and house them, find housing for families, welcome them, and then find some of the basic furniture they need, fridges, a washing machine, beds and cupboards, things that they need just to live, the basics that we take for granted. And a little charity raises money, but as soon as they've got enough, it goes. She puts them up in units and they pay the rent for a few months to help these families that come with nothing to get on their feet. They share with them their pain, the stories of the deep pain they experience in their homeland, of having their homes bulldozed, their little villages destroyed, their livelihoods taken away, and then pushed off the land that generations of their family have settled, and they have nowhere to go. They feel the danger and the pain and the experience, and they feel lost and powerless in the world. And this little charity brings hope and life. And the miracles multiply. And it's not just for Christians that she works with, but anyone, any of her Palestinian brothers and sisters. And the stories are just beautiful. Our world is a world full of pain and great suffering, where much is spent on warfare and the weapons of warfare, the weapons of death. And amidst the news of the day, where there's crisis in the Middle East, in Palestine, in the Ukraine, in other parts of the world, in the homes across our nation, where innocent people, women and children, are abused and violently murdered, and where there's violence in the streets, there are also signs of hope. Places like Meals Plus that welcome all people and declare a message of love and grace to anyone who comes. Feeding the body, the mind, the spirit, building community and creating hope. And that's the way of God, and we're welcomed into that transformative way in our world. A way that the world needs so desperately. A way that the world yearns for. Will you be part of this way of love, this way of grace and hope?